This is Sam Shepard with going to be answering some of your questions you sent in to AskSam at ValAsta.net. And this is part 2 because we had so many important questions that came in, and I'm absolutely elated for the people to be looking at this and acquiring that knowledge. There's no better motivation than if it's happening to you. I can tell you that from experience. So we're going to continue on and actually have 2 videos for this week. And the topics that are coming in, most can be categorized into 1 or 2 topics, but some of them I'm going to get into some basic inquiries, and hopefully I'll be able to answer most of those. Some of them I'm not familiar with, but I'll tell you what those are. Here's one from Sue. It says, all my family are taking ValAsta, great product. Can you talk about pets usually, especially dogs, taking ValAsta? Can dogs get all the same benefits as human taking ValAsta? My senior dog recently been having dry cough in the morning. I'm not sure if it's allergies or the weather being cold in the morning or something else. Dogs and monkeys and mice and rats are what most of the research has been done on. We were able to, and there's several reports where they were able early on in early 2000s to stop pancreatic and glioblastoma brain cancer in dogs and monkeys. And that is where we gleaned all of this information. So when we began to look at this data in the animal studies, it was dogs that primarily pointed us in the right direction, that we're on the right path to not only treating cancer, but actually understanding the cause of cancer and how to keep people from ever getting cancer. So with that in mind and with this question, I'm going to relay a story. I had a dog, his name was Duke. He, in 2018, was diagnosed with anal gland cancer. We took him into the vet. The vet confirmed through a biopsy that it was cancer and said that he had probably 2 to 4 weeks. We'd probably have to put him down. And I brought him home, gave him a very high dose compared to his body weight of ValAsta. And he lived for 4 more years, cancer-free. And we now are providing it to animals that are operate in very stressful conditions. For example, it can be used in horse races to stop lactic acid buildup. It's a natural supplement, so it's not regulated in the horse racing industry. It can be used for dogs, for cats. The metabolism in most animals is basically the same. I've not used it on any reptiles. I don't know about alligators or snakes or anything like that. But in the higher level of animals, the monkeys, the cats, the dogs, even birds could benefit from this. A lot of the coloring that's in red birds, for example, are these same carotenoids. So that's something to keep in mind. That's where they get their color from, are from these same materials. The only side effect of giving it to animals that we've observed is their stool will be red. Don't freak out, it's not blood. It's the same as in human beings. But it is metabolized basically the same way. Here's one from Michael. I noticed you recommend staying away from fructose. We talked about that earlier. Are there other foods I should steer clear of? What about red meat? I've heard that heme in red meat feeds the cancer. This is a very interesting, although I don't think it was asked with this intent in mind. Cancer has a tendency to accumulate iron in its cells. And iron is one of the metals, along with copper selenium to some extent, which is not really a metal, but iron in the form of Fe+2 reacts with water, H2O, to yield hydroxyl free radicals. This is why high levels of iron in your body can be detrimental. A lot of the reactive oxygen species in the form of the hydroxyl or the peroxyl form, anytime you have a double bond oxygen, can be produced from this. It's called the Friedel-Crafts reaction. It happens in the metabolic process inside the cell. Cancer cells maintain a high level of the hydroxyl free radical having a 0 charge in its cell. This has a pH of between, it truly depends, of 5.5 to 6.8. So cancer cells can operate and want to operate in an acidic environment. So in the pH scale, 14 is alkaline, 7 is water, is neutral, 1 is acidic. So anything in this range here, from here to here, is acid. Anything from here to here is alkaline. This will be on the test, so make sure you're taking good notes. Cancer cells like operating in an acid environment. Our blood pH is 7.35. That cannot be changed. Your body goes through an extensive metabolic process to maintain your blood pH at 7.35. If that number drops to 7, you're going to be very sick. If that number goes to 8, you're going to be very sick. That's important. You cannot change that number by drinking alkaline water. You cannot really change that number by doing anything. But these free radicals, the OH free radical, is what's called a conjugate acid, in that it can accept an electron. Now, this will lower the pH. It will kill adjacent normal cells around the tumor to make space for the growth of the cancer cells. Now, when the astaxanthin goes in, the astaxanthin can donate an electron to this. So you have the OH free radical plus an electron goes to an OH, this has a 0 charge, goes to an OH -1. So this free radical is reduced. It's gone from a 0 charge down to a -1 charge. This shoots the pH up over 10. The cancer cell dies in 4 seconds. So astaxanthin is the Trojan horse that carries these electrons into the cancer cell, that causes this reaction to happen with this high concentration of free radicals that the cancer cell is producing. And all of a sudden it kills that cancer cell. This is how we believe is the mechanism of kill in most cancer tumors. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at this. The real advantage of this electron here, comes from the astaxanthin. I'm just going to call it AST. Now, this astaxanthin can donate an electron without itself becoming a free radical. So the danger's over. The astaxanthin molecule is so large, and it has what's called conjugated double bonds. Dun, 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 dun. Like this, and it goes on for a long time. So every alternate bond is a double bond. That allows this to resonate or be in an electron configuration where electrons can move and without being reactive. So this is not reactive and will not accept any more electrons, because if there's an electron deficiency in this long chain of astaxanthin, the electron just moves up and down in the cloud. So this is a very, very stable, and itself does not become a free radical. This is why it does not become a pro-oxidant in the liver, unlike vitamin C, unlike vitamin D, vitamin E. They are pro-oxidants, and high doses of those can cause a pretty severe inflammatory response in the liver. So keep that in mind. One of the questions that relates to this is it safe to always take high doses of astaxanthin? Well, the advantage is that you can take very high doses. We've been as high as 3,000 milligrams per day in one case. No side effects, because the astaxanthin does not result in an inflammatory molecule at the end when it's metabolized. The only disadvantage of taking very high doses is that your body is only going to absorb based on the enzymes that it has in the small bowel. You're going to max out on your ability to absorb it. There's two pressures that cause astaxanthin to go into your body. The first one is chemical. So you actually have a chemical attraction to the astaxanthin, and a lot of people see this when they look at the electronegativity of astaxanthin. If you get a small pinprick of ValAsta on you and you look around and it's pretty much all over you, it is electrostatically active. It goes a long way, and people who have contaminated their clothing or got stains, they know that a small drop electrostatically goes a long way. So that's one. It's chemically active. The other one that we're finding out now is what's called concentration dependent or dose dependent. Now, this is what we've been relying on, chemically attaching to the enzyme, getting carried into the bloodstream, and this is where we get our glucosidic astaxanthin. We chemically understand it very, very well. But now, as we increase the dose, the response appears to increase, and this is called a concentration gradient. Concentration, I'm just going to do it this way. Gradient. And basically think of this as pressure. The more I have, the greater the pressure to force it into the system. That's what this does. So there's two ways of increasing the dose, and we see the response being proportional to the amount pushed into our bodies, into our system. These are complements of each other. The enzymes in the bowel will chemically attach to the astaxanthin and drag it in, especially if it sees that glucosidic astaxanthin. And ValAsta is the only company that has the patent that states that their product can be used for the treatment of disease, inflammatory disease. We think now these are the two primary reasons. Over time, as your body pulls more and more of the astaxanthin in and uses the electrons on there to reduce the hydroxyl free radical, that demand will cause the enzymes, more enzymes to be created in the small bowel. So the effectiveness of the enzymatic carrying of astaxanthin into your bloodstream increases, which means we have to increase the dose, and that's why we look at your stool and make sure that it's red, so that if it's not red, it means you're absorbing a lot more of the ValAsta and you need more. So we can just push it by increasing the dose, forcing more into your body, and take advantage of this concentration gradient issue, and that has a major advantage. Now, when we looked at the previous one, when we eat a lot of red meat, I'm going to bounce around here a little bit. When we, only the Fe+2 goes to the hydroxyl free radical. This is water, H2O. So in the presence of water, iron will convert the water into a hydroxyl free radical. If I can donate an electron to Fe+2, Fe+2 plus an electron gives me Fe+1. Fe+1 is not as effective in this reaction as Fe+2. Now if I take Fe+1, now this electron can be coming from astaxanthin too. So if I take Fe+1 and I add another electron, it goes to Fe0. Fe0 is iron ore. This will crystallize out and be taken out of your system. In this case here, this would react with a hydroxyl -1 to form FeOH. And this can be taken out through your liver and disposed of also. This is the one that's posing the problem. That's the one that we're finding at a very high concentration inside the cancer cell. If that's in the cancer cell, any water that's in that cancer cell increases the hydroxyl free radical. So red meats have a very high iron content. Liver, very high iron content. Some people are short iron in their bloodstream because in some cases the iron's being extracted by the cancer cell and accumulated in the cancer cell. It's no longer in the blood to even be tested. So when we look at ferritin levels, for example, and ferritin levels in cancer patients are dropping, that means that the cancer cell is probably growing. Let's see here. I noticed you recommend staying away from fructose and limit your servings of fruit to 1 serving a day. Are there other foods I should steer clear of? What about red meat? I've read that the heme in red meat feeds the cancer. Is the heme content in wild game the same as in the beef? I have squamous cell carcinoma in my throat. It's the same issue. Anything with heme, anything with red blood has a tendency to do this. Chlorophyll in vegetables, for example, is magnesium-based. There are certain metals, manganese, iron, copper. They are all metals that have a tendency to do this, and yet they're still of vital importance in our bodies. So it's always a balance. It's hard to say absolutely one way or the other. It depends on what you're eating and how you live your life. What types of prostate requirements dose would it take for prostate? With prostate cancers, we start out with the 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight, and then we observe the effects, and we change the dose based on what we see after that. Will A-fib resolve taking this magic elixir? It's not a magic elixir. That's one thing. We don't have any information that it's going to affect A-fib, but when I had polycythemia and my blood got very thick, I was in A-fib. I had a pretty serious problem with it, and that's where they were concerned about blood clots. Once the polycythemia got resolved, the A-fib stopped. So it's indirect. You have to look at what's causing the A-fib to know whether it's an inflammatory response. Is it an electrical dysfunction? Is it a mechanical dysfunction? All of those have different answers. Does Velasta help heal the heart, cardiovascular problems, and nerve regeneration? Only if it's inflammatory. If there's a lot of damage done, like in Alzheimer's, we can't regrow the nerve endings. Velasta is not going to be able to do that. Chadley writes, thank you for your Q&A sessions you have started. I personally feel these are telling much more information in a short period of time. My wife is currently on a drug called EnHertu. That's a new one. It is quite a new drug in the arsenal of the smart bomb technology family. This is an immunotherapy, chemotherapy. I'm curious that because of the way the immunotherapy works, the way that Velasta works, are you guys seeing a sort of Batman and Robin effect here? This is interesting. Any other data to support that the way the Velasta works with other treatments, with the cancer, and the way that the immunotherapy drugs work? This is probably one of the more interesting ones, and here recently, within the last several months, we have several people taking chemo immunotherapies with the Velasta. The results are pretty astounding. There's almost like a synergistic effect. There's some research done with a drug called Gemcitabine. You can Google that. It's NIH and Gemcitabine and astaxanthin. And they did a clinical study that showed Gemcitabine chemo treatment and then Gemcitabine with astaxanthin. And this was done on pancreatic cancer. The pancreatic cancer stopped when they combined the two, the Gemcitabine and the astaxanthin. It did not stop with Gemcitabine alone. That really made us stand up and realize that this could be a two-pronged attack. I don't have any real clinical evidence of this yet, but we're seeing the results that those who are on chemo, immunotherapy in particular, and take Velasta are seeing dramatic results. A lot of the doctors are being very confounded by this. There appears to be a synergistic effect. Let's see. A few weeks ago, ordered the dark chocolate, running low. Okay, someone in Massachusetts delivered. I'm going to pass on that one. That's something that the salespeople can answer. The last batch of ValAsta I got was very runny and much more bitter than the other 3 bottles I had before. Is this normal? It doesn't feel right. Okay, I don't know how to respond to it doesn't feel right yet, but this is a natural product, and we meet all of the tight specifications. It may be that we're not looking at it, a key component in it, so there can be probably some variability, but what we've determined on the spec sheets, and you can ask for those spec sheets also, you can also ask for an MSD sheet, and there can be some variability in the flavor. This was in the UK, so there could have been a shipping issue maybe. We just don't know why there can be that variation in taste. It can be personal. It can be the chemo treatments, for example, can change your taste buds. But we really don't know why people sense that variability at this point. We could probably try to look into it, do a mass spec, and look at what molecules are even in there, but that's an additional expense to do that. We don't see any change in efficacy of it. So we do see the same response from that product also, but we're going to be a lot more cognizant of that and taking a look at it. Let's see here. This person's taking EnHertu, which is the immunotherapy drug. I think I spoke on that. It's doing very well. the doctors are, they do talk about how awesome it is and how people are having tremendous results, but our doctors seem to be particularly shocked at what it's doing for my wife. They will say things like it's doing well for most people, but doing very well for her. But she's doing ValAsta also. With that, I'm going to close, and we'll do the same thing next week. Keep sending your questions in to AskSam at ValAsta.net, and we'll get to them. Thank you very much.